Caius Cosades, the man, the myth, the legend. Caius is one of the main NPCs in the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind who actively helps and mentors the player. At first, he seems kind of odd. He's an older imperial male who stands around shirtless in his home all day and has a crippling skooma addiction. However, we soon come to learn that Caius is a man of many talents. He's a Grand Spymaster for the Blades, making him the highest ranking member in Vvardenfell at the time. He's a trained monk and offers services in hand-to-hand, speechcraft, and unarmored, all up to level 70. Perhaps the most impressive, Caius is very well connected. He has contacts all over Vvardenfell. They stretch far and wide, from connections in major cities to the oddballs on secluded farms and ranches. He gives the Nerevarine a lot of advice, gold, items, and overall, general aid in their mission to defeat Dagoth and the Sixth House. Perhaps one of the biggest tragedies in Morrowind is Caius' ending. After locating Meyra Milo and the Lost Prophecies, and just before starting the 3rd, 4th, and 5th trials, he drops some heavy news on the player. He says that he's being recalled back to the Imperial City in order to discuss his skooma problems, as well as politics within the capital. He foreshadows that the Emperor's health is declining, and that there's going to be major turmoil within the next couple of years regarding his succession. As he disappears from the game forever, he wishes the player luck on their journey to becoming Nerevarine. Well, as it turns out, according to some very legitimate sources, Caius arrived in the Imperial City, took care of his business, and then, a couple of years later, enlisted in the arena in order to become Grand Champion. So that's not really true, but for today, we're going to pretend that it is, and we're going to see if Caius Cosades can beat Cyrodiil's arena in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. As an homage to Caius, I created him as my character in the game. I did my darndest to get him to look similar to the grizzled spymaster we see in Morrowind, perhaps with a little more age to him. The looks were pretty easy to attain, however, it was his class, skills, and birth sign that were more concerning. Luckily, thanks to the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, we're able to know exactly what Caius' build was, minus the birth sign. As mentioned before, he's Morrowind's version of a monk, so that includes a specialization in stealth, favorite attributes of agility and willpower, major skills of hand-to-hand, unarmored, athletics, acrobatics, and sneak, then minor skills of block, marksman, light armor, restoration, and blunt weapons. However, Oblivion's monk class is slightly different. The specialization and favorite attributes are the same, but the major skills are changed up a bit. Since there are 7 major skills in Oblivion and only 5 in Morrowind, the selected ones are security, sneak, acrobatics, marksman, alteration, hand-to-hand, and athletics. Going ahead with those, I then moved on to Caius' birth sign, which I struggled to pick. There aren't any tip-offs for what it is in Morrowind, so wanting at least one bone thrown to me, I picked the warrior in order to help with my combat. As far as Caius' inventory goes, at most he has skooma, some gold, and maybe the odd potion or two. He doesn't fight with weapons or wear armor. So, for this arena run, hand-to-hand was going to be my main source of dealing damage, and since I have to wear some sort of raiment, I figured I'd go with the light armor when I got there. According to the wiki, Caius knows a lot of spells. Almost all of them are to resist some kind of element or attack type though. The two that I would consider using down the line are Absorb Health as well as Absorb Fatigue. Now, one of Caius' most notable traits is his addiction to sugar. His house looks like a college dorm as there's pipes, moon sugar, skooma, everything that a Tamriel addict would need. What better place to acquire some of the goods than Bravil? Caius would obviously be well connected and probably would have made the acquaintance of those living in the skooma den. Unfortunately, they don't like to share, so he would have to steal some bottles for himself. Formalities aside, there's one last thing that needs to be done before joining the arena. In Morrowind, Caius Cosades is actually level 25. He's earned his stripes as Grand Spymaster and his skills and traits reflect that. So I figured I'd give it the old blades try and mirror his abilities to the best of mine. I wouldn't put too much love and passion on this build though, as you'll soon see why. But for those who would like to hear the data, Caius Prime's final form goes as follows. He's an Imperial monk with the birth sign of the warrior. He's level 25, his total health is 292, which is actually too much, as Morrowind puts it at just over 200. However, there's no unarmored skill and he has nothing going for him in terms of light armor. His magicka is only 80, which is in fact too little, as it's apparently 118. His fatigue is 224. As for attributes, his strength and endurance are level 75. Intelligence is 40, willpower is 35, agility is 59, speed is 40, personality is 50, and luck is 60. Moving on to major skills, athletics, hand-to-hand, and acrobatics are level 70. Alteration is level 25, marksman is 30, security is 55, and sneak is 30. As for minor skills, none of them have been altered except for speechcraft, which is 70. It appears as though Caius's greatest asset is his charm, so I figured might as well boost that up. If you know anything about the arena, you probably know that this isn't going to be an efficient build at level 25, but Caius is him and he's ready for anything, or so I thought. Signing up with Owen and entering for my first match, I saw the yellow team combatant had glass equipment and got pretty nervous. Popping a skooma at the beginning, I went rushing in. Immediately, I noticed how little my opponent's health was moving down and knew this wasn't going to end well. Heavy attacks seemed to be the best bang for my buck in this situation. Especially with her range, speed, and damage dealt, getting in quickly and slipping out wasn't really an option. My saving grace, however, was being able to knock her down a couple of times. In those moments, I could pummel her with my quick jabs and take down some of her health. The fight was getting down to the wire, as her HP was probably at a quarter, but I knew that it was over. I had a sliver left, and there wasn't really a way for me to hit her without getting hit back. Pulling back her arm, she slung it forward, slashing Caius, ending the Imperial Grand Spy Master's life. Or so she thought. Trying again, I slugged back some skooma and showed no mercy. My fists were flying, I was throwing my 1, 2, 3, 4 combos, and my knuckles were bruising up against her glass shield. She, however, also came to play and hacked my health way down. The fight was once again over, and Caius would never again be able to return to Vardenfell. Or so everyone thought. At this point, the writing should have been on the wall, but I wanted to keep going. This time, Caius came prepared with some health potions. He's level 25 and has a rather prestigious position in the Empire. I would think he would have had a handful of consumables on him. This time, my plan was to slip in, throw a heavy attack, and slip out. It was actually working, and combined with knocking her down, things were turning up Cosades. At one point, the yellow team combatant healed herself, and I was worried all my progress was for nothing. Fortunately, her regeneration was only minor, and I could match it with slamming back a health pot. The fight continued onwards, and we were neck and neck. Finally, after throwing continuous double fisters, she went down and the match was over. Caius had won his first fight as a pit dog, after multiple non-canon defeats. I was feeling pretty good in the moment and just about ready for anything. Then came the next opponent. He came out with an ebony longsword, ebony shield, a Daedric helm, and heavy raiment. He dealt even more damage to me, and his health was going down even slower than the last combatants. The fight went horribly, as did the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It felt pretty hopeless. Even after slugging back skooma, which really is only for the immersion, and 4 strong potions of healing, he would beat me at every turn. My insane acrobatic skill didn't really help much, even though I was able to reach some pretty impressive heights with them. The one thing I did learn from this run though was that my blocks were actually able to stagger my opponent. I didn't think they would do anything beyond cutting down on some of the direct damage, but I was wrong. It was through this newfound observation and a few more banked health potions that I was able to bring myself to victory. My new strategy was this. I would analyze his attacks and react appropriately. If they were heavy attacks, I would get out of there as quickly as possible. If they were light attacks though, I would block them and then go in for the DK smash attack. When he staggered, I would unleash a fury of jabs and get in as many licks as possible. Finally, through many repetitions and 8 strong health potions, he was bested, and that was my second fight completed. Believe me though, it still wasn't lost on me that these were only the pit dog matches. The next battle was against an Argonian archer, and I mean, come on. At first, I wanted to evade his arrows using my acrobatics and athletics, but the guy could shoot. So I just got up in his face and relentlessly pounded on him. No skooma, no health potions, just straight gas from Caius, and the advancement match was won. My first fight as a brawler went pretty well. Using light attacks, I could chip away at his health, and similar to the same strategy as match number 2, I would try my best to block at the right times. Kudos to the yellow team combatant, he put up a decent fight. Forced to slug back my final 2 health potions, I had him on the ropes. Left jab, right cross, hook, uppercut, hit after hit, punch after punch, the Nord soon lay dead on the floor, and Caius was once again victorious. Now, at this point, I was feeling pretty guilty that I had all of these strong health potions at my disposal. I wasn't exactly earning them, and even though Caius probably could get his hands on a lot of them, and by level 25 they are a dime a dozen, it still didn't feel right. As learned through my Conjurer challenge, health potions win fights, and I didn't want this playthrough to be about how many potions I would need to consume per fight. The final nail in the coffin was the second match for Brawler rank. This was the first fight where I had to face more than one combatant. It was the two Wood Elf sisters, and while one came charging in with a Dwarven Claymore, the other stayed back and let loose a flurry of arrows. It already would have taken me an eternity to win against one melee fighter, but couple that with an archer? Maybe the real Caius could have handled this, but not great value Caius. The most I could do was charge in and single out the archer. She was the easier of the two to beat, and her attacks were less frequent. Of course, her claymore-wielding sister would follow me around and swing for the fences, so it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Even after chugging multiple health potions, the fight was pretty difficult to win, and like mentioned before, I didn't want the consumables to carry this playthrough. Throwing in the towel, great value, level 25, skills sort of matching the real Caius, Caius Cosades was officially retired. In his place came Dollar Tree, level 1, fresh from the sewers, still a skooma addict, Caius Cosades. Going through the first 4 matches again, I would say they were more appropriate for this build and its inception, if that makes sense. I didn't need to use any health potions, and the pit dogs were falling rather easily, yet they were still hitting pretty hard and getting my health down to low amounts. Match number 2 was still tricky, and he still killed me a few times. The archer though was fine, I mean again, come on. And for the 4th match, Caius got his butt handed to him right away. The Nord came rushing out and cast some form of frost spell on me, immediately lowering my HP to less than half. From there, I knew that everything was not coming up Millhouse, and he made quick work of me. It almost felt like newbie match 2 of Brawler was trickier than God mode undeserving level 25 match 2 of Brawler. Fortunately though, I got pretty lucky with attempt number 2, as he didn't use any of his game-ending moves. Lunging in, getting a ground pound off, and lunging out, the Nord didn't last very long with these combos, and soon I was caught up to where I had previously left off. With my earnings from the arena, Caius paid a quick visit to the Gilded Carafe and bought a whopping 3 weak potions of Restore Health. In order to get into the right mindset, Cosades also mellowed out with his people at the den and sucked back on that sweet sugar. Back to the fighting, the next match was the infamous Double Bossmer Brawl. For this attempt, I singled out the sword fighter first and beat her down. She was able to deal a decent amount of damage to me, knocking my health down to about 1/3, but ultimately, I was able to defeat her by staying behind a pillar, rendering her sister useless. Then came the archer fight. I assumed this one was going to be easy, because I mean, come on. But given my health and her steady hands, it seemed like every arrow found its mark. She would fire her shot, drop my health down by quite a bit, back up, and repeat the process. I was just barely able to deliver the killing blow, and Caius lived to fight another match. In fact, the next one was the advancement match. This battle was with the Khajiit who used a 2-handed battle axe. He wore a heavy raiment and had a chainmail helm. His health wasn't going down very easily, and his heavy attacks were working wonders on mine. At one point, I had to slam back my last health pot, as well as my last bottle of skooma. Right after that though, the Khajiit almost completely healed, and I was pretty scared for Caius' life. The battle raged on for a bit, Cosades with only but a sliver of health. I did an okay job at following the fundamentals: keep my distance, lunge in, leap out, keep an eye out for heavy attacks, etc. The turning point in the fight was when I got a couple of lucky punches in and staggered him multiple times in a row. Letting loose the flurry of hits, the Khajiit went down, and that was another victory. It now felt like the right time to expand my combat abilities. As once mentioned, Morrowind Caius knows some absorb health spells. So I looked up who was selling a novice version of it, and I was brought to Thoron of the Anvil Mages Guild. Purchasing the spell for 70 gold, I then used the remainder of Cosades' earnings to buy 2 more health potions. The next 2 matches went off without a hitch. My newfound absorption spell wasn't the greatest for giving me extra health, but it was at least decent at draining my opponents. Alternating attacks on the Redguard Bloodletter led to a rather easy victory. The next one, however, was a little trickier. The combatant had some protection spells cast on her. My absorb health spell wasn't really doing anything, but at the same time, every hit that I landed, there seemed to be some sort of force around her that glowed. She had heavy armor on, which at this point, when I see that, means that I'm in for a tough time. We were pretty neck and neck for most of the battle in terms of HP, but I usually have to work harder to get to that point. Consuming my 2 health pots brought me back in, and the fight continued on. Finally, after landing one good smash attack on her shield, she went down and it was on to the next fight. Having some winnings saved up, Caius spat out 3 more potions from Peric. Little did he know though that he wouldn't really be needing them. The next fight was against an archer sword fighter hybrid, and I mean, come on. He came out of the gates, bow in hand, ready to let loose his arrows. Caius, however, pressed the attack, got up in his face, and took it like a champ. Relentlessly beating on the Dark Elf likely reminded him about his exile from Vvardenfell, and probably made him even more enraged. The Dunmer tried to switch to his sword and board, but it was too late. Cosades had beat him to a pulp. The next fighter was against the Bosmer wielding Shimmer Strike. It was actually a pretty interesting battle. He was the first opponent who had a range similar to mine, so we both needed to get up close in order to inflict some damage. Shimmer Strike's enchantments were taking a toll on my health, and for a little bit, things were looking bleak. However, I caught a lucky break when the Wood Elf fell to the ground, and I was able to repeatedly punch down on him. Caius' cover story of becoming the Grand Champion was looking more and more real as time went on. The next match was against a Wood Elf in light armor using a sword and board. She might have been the easiest fight yet, barring maybe some of the archers, but I mean, come on. She couldn't get Cosades' health down to even a quarter. Meanwhile, her HP was dropping faster than a Warhammer wielding Bosmer's fatigue. Up next was an orc in heavy armor, swinging around a battle axe. Something about his attack pattern seemed really predictable. It might have been him taking a long time to let off his heavy attacks, or perhaps his tendency to stand around and take my punches. In any case, it worked at making me feel like I didn't have to try as hard. With my guard down, the fight came down to the wire, and through the luck of staggering, I was able to unleash my finishing combo. The next battle was against a Nord warrior. I never noticed how surprisingly similar she looked to the yellow team's champion, so it felt extra fulfilling to beat her. We were pretty evenly matched, going swing for swing with our attacks. If anything, I was kind of standing in one spot while she was the one to move around the pit, making me turn and swivel. As mentioned prior, whenever Caius and the opponent are neck and neck, that usually means that I have to pop some health potions in order to keep up. Doing so, moments later, I let off the final punch and ended the match. The next fighter was actually my first spellcasting opponent. I wasn't sure how my modified monk build was going to handle it, but things went pretty decently. I found the main trick was to just stay away from her destruction magic. Her sword fighting abilities were pretty lousy, but I knew for a fact if she hit me with her fire spells, that would be at least half of my health gone. Throwing around my jabs and crosses, I was able to drop her a few times and get some free hits in. Finally, to end the fight, I gave her a taste of her own medicine and sapped her health down to 0. Caius was feeling pretty good right now, and on top of the world. It felt like nothing could get in my way, and that I was destined to fight against Agronacro Malog. That was until I stepped into the pit with my next opponent. It was the advancement match, and boy oh boy, Owen wasn't kidding when he said this was the most blood-crazed orc he had ever seen. Testing her abilities at first, she came out swinging her glass warhammer with her orcish helm and her heavy armor. Her first 2 hits dropped me to below half health. I threw a few hooks and uppercuts in there, but I was no match and she flattened me in 20 seconds. Realizing I'd have to gear up for this one, I went back to the Gilded Carafe and bought a few more health potions. From there, I wanted to try out a new spell and see how much it would benefit me, Absorb Fatigue. Thoron at the Anvil Mages Guild Hall had it for sale at a pretty cheap price. Trying again, this time I focused on sapping her fatigue and staying out of her Warhammer's path. It seemed to work well, and maybe this detail was a placebo of some kind, but she almost seemed to be moving slower. In any case, she still hit like a truck, and even with slamming back all 8 health potions, she always seemed to come out on top. There were times where I would get close to sealing the deal, but she would pop her health potion and almost regenerate back to full HP. Restocking on consumables and frankly, overbuying them, I was finally able to defeat her. It's funny because originally I said that I didn't want Caius to rely on potions for his victories, and yet here he is. Having all of these crutches makes me feel like a lazy fighter, and allows me to throw all sort of tactic and strategy out the window. Nevertheless, I kept the pressure on, stayed in her face as she did with me, and kept wailing away. Soon, she dropped dead, and gone was my first crux of this playthrough. However, the next match was the one I was probably dreading the most, the 3 Argonian prisoners fight. It never really mattered what my playstyle was while going through the arena. Practically any time I arrived at this match, the first battle of gladiators, I'd have a tough time. The Argonians have decent stats, including health and attack power. 2 of them fight with fists, while the third fights with a sword. If you don't focus your efforts on one of them and systematically eliminate each one, it's going to be difficult. Even while trying to single out a lone Argonian, the other 2 are really good at bringing on the attack. I died during this match more than I'd care to admit. I was even thinking of throwing in the towel here for good, but I decided that Caius wasn't a quitter. Paying a visit to Vilverin, clearing out the bandits, and looting all of the treasures within, I sold them off for some extra pocket change and turned to the drink. The drink being health potions. You see, Caius is no longer a skooma addict. No, he's a health potion addict. I was able to snag 24 consumables in total for preparation for this fight. Even after doing so, I still lost the fight a couple more times. Finally though, I was able to come on top, and here's what my strategy was. Focus on the Argonian with the sword first. He hit the hardest and had the best blocking capabilities. This sapped up most of my time and potions, leaving me with under half of them left. Once he was out of the picture, then my sights were set on either opponent, but making sure I was solely focusing on one of them. As soon as they were defeated, I moved on to the last one. I felt pretty lucky having a few pots left at this point, as I could pretty much tell that the fight was over. A couple dozen punches later, all 3 Argonians were defeated, and I only had 6 matches left to go. Owen put it best for this next fight. 1 enemy was much easier to face than 3. The Khajiit was tough though, so I'll give him that. He fought with an elven longsword and shield. My tactic was to attempt to drain his fatigue first, in order to stagger and drop him to the floor. Caius' opponent's health wasn't lowering by that much though, and my stamina bar wasn't doing me any favors. Fortunately, through persistence and patience, I was able to come out on top. I'll spare you the future details, but in between almost every single fight, I was heading over to All Things Alchemical in Skingrad in order to buy out Philanu's stock of potions. Back to the arena, the last fight as a gladiator was against a Breton wielding a longsword. Even though he gave me a run for my money, at this point, it's not saying that much. I had to pop those newly acquired health potions, but the match ran pretty standard. We took turns swinging on each other, I would cast my spells, he would occasionally fall to the ground, etc. Delivering the killing blow, I only had a few more matches to go now. Soon, Caius would be the grand champion, and he would make the Nerevarine proud. The next opponent was the former Blades member. I wondered if he would have recognized Cosades at all if this was the real deal, and if so, how would the fight have gone down? Well, it seems that they don't train the Blades nearly as well as people say they do. I quote-unquote only had to pop 6 health potions during this battle, which should make the other guy feel bad about his efforts. He swung around his Akaviri katana and used his shield to block my fist, but ultimately only the Grand Spymaster was left standing. From here on out, with only 3 fights left, they got pretty interesting. A spellcasting Altmer came rushing out and let me have it. His destruction magic was devastating, and he wasn't so bad with a blade. The difference between him and the last mage was that this one could actually cast ranged spells, meaning that even at a distance, I was never truly safe. The cherry on top was that he was able to resist both of my spells due to his enchanted shield, the Grey Aegis. Luckily, he was never able to properly best me, and his light armor made him pretty squishy as an opponent. With him defeated, there were now only 2 matches left, although they weren't going to be a cakewalk, or so I thought. It was me and Porkchop versus an archer, a spellcaster, and the yellow team's champion. I figured the champion was going to be the trickiest, so I started out with focusing her. What I had failed to account for, however, was how overpowered Porkchop was going to be. Their sorceress came rushing in, and in a matter of moments, the boar had mauled her. He had even managed to temporarily trap the champion in the walkout tunnel. This gave me enough time to charge on in against the archer, and I mean, come on. As I worked him like a punching bag, Porkchop was actively fighting against the champion, who was still aggroed onto me. By the time the archer was dead, come on, the yellow team champion had maybe a 1/5 of her health left. That's when I decided to let the boar finish what he had started and maul her to death as well. With all 3 opponents slain, there was only one person left standing in the way of Grand Champion, the Grey Prince, Agrenak Gromalog. Challenging him to a fight, I chose the Crimson Blade as my nickname, which felt right for Caius. Meeting Agrenak in the arena, I knew I was in for a rough time. Practically every other opponent in the arena is level to the character. The only one that isn't is Gromalog. He instead is the perfect level 10 warrior. If I was level 25, great value Caius Cosades, easy match, we're going home early. But as level 2, bottom of the barrel Caius, no way this was happening without a plethora of health potions. It's not even that he hit that hard or was able to send me flying across the arena with one twirl, it was the fact that I was barely able to do any damage to him. Heavy attacks, magic, light attacks, it didn't matter, his health wasn't budging. So I had to put Caius's potion addiction into overdrive and stock up on his favorite. The fight was long, it was dirty, it was grueling, it was punishing, and I didn't feel that good about the victory in the end. But hey, game is game. In order to successfully beat the Grey Prince, I needed to pop 29 weak health potions. In the grand scheme of things, it's not the worst, and for a level 2 altered monk fighting against the perfect level 10 warrior, it might actually be acceptable. With Agrenak Gromalog defeated, Caius Cosades had officially become the new Grand Champion and established the perfect cover for his blade's operation. Here's what I learned from this experience. The monk class is kind of difficult to play as. I by no means am a hardcore gamer, nor am I that skilled at combat in this game, but it was hard. Granted, Caius's build and lack of offensive or defensive assets just make it so much worse. You can tell that he was meant to be the guy who talks and gives orders, and not necessarily the Emperor's personal bodyguard. I already knew this part, but once again, it's been proven that potions win fights. They carried this playthrough as they've done with so many others. Otherwise, call it as you will, but I would have been hard stopped at the final warrior fight, and in some ways, that's where the challenge of it all ended. Lastly, it's tricky to make characters that are so artificially advanced in levels like great value Caius. Sure, you can raise them to level 25, but how do you distribute the skills and attribute points evenly so that way the character is evenly leveled? That I have no clue and ask your help with for the future. Thus ends Caius Cosades' adventure through Oblivion's arena faction, and until next time, keep on adventuring.